Hell screen. Picture a burning ox carriage, alone in a dead garden in the middle of the night. Inside it, a woman is screaming. Outside it, kneeling in the mud, is the greatest painter in the capital, and he is not trying to save her. He is watching. He is memorizing the exact color her hair turns the instant before it catches fire, because he needs that color for a painting. This really happened, or as close to really happened as anything 1,000 years old can be. And it was told to me by a servant who stood close enough to that fire to hear the woman's voice through it. The painter's name was Yoshihide. By the end of this story, he will be the most celebrated artist his lord has ever employed. And he will also be dead by his own hand, hanging from a beam in the very room where he painted it. This is Hell Screen. Chapter 1. The Lord of Horikawa. There has never been another man like the great Lord of Horikawa, and I doubt there ever will be again. They say that before he was born, a fearsome guardian king appeared to his mother in a dream. Some say it was Daitoku himself, the wrathful one who rides a bull through hell. I can't swear that's true. What I can tell you is that everything about him, from the size of his mansion to the size of his appetite for pleasure, was too large for an ordinary man to have dreamed up. Some small-minded people like to compare him to the tyrants of ancient China, Qin Shi Huang, Emperor Yang of Sui. But that's like the old story of blind men touching different parts of an elephant and arguing about what animal it is. The Lord didn't build his palaces just to please himself. He wanted the whole capital to feel his generosity, down to the poorest beggar in it. That's probably why nothing ever seemed to touch him. Not the 100 demons said to march through the crossroads at Nijo Omiya at night. Not even the vengeful ghost of Minister Toru, which reportedly still haunted the mansion he'd built to mimic a famous seaside view, until the Lord shouted at it and it fled. People in the capital talked about him the way you'd talk about a saint walking among us. Once, coming home from a plum blossom party, the ox pulling his carriage broke loose and trampled an old man in the road. And the old man, bleeding on the ground, pressed his palms together and thanked the gods he'd been struck down by the Lord's own ox. I could fill a night with stories like that. He once handed out 30 white horses at a single banquet as gifts. He had a boy he was fond of buried alive as a living pillar under a bridge, following some old custom of sacrifice. I never saw it happen myself, but the story has never died. He let a foreign monk cut a tumor from his thigh using surgical techniques passed down from the legendary physician Hua Tuo. None of it seemed to strain him at all. But out of everything the Lord did in his long life, nothing was stranger. Nothing has stayed with me, the way the story of the Hell Screen has. The folding screen that today sits among the treasured heirlooms of his house. Even he, a man never rattled by anything, was shaken by what happened. And those of us who served him, we felt something closer to what it must be like to watch your own soul leave your body. I served the Lord for 20 years, and I never saw anything like it, before or since. But before I can tell you what happened, I have to tell you about the man who painted it. His name was Yoshihide. Nobody in the capital in those days suspected just how far that man was willing to go for the love of his art, or for the love of his own daughter. Chapter 2. The painter they called Monkey. Some of you may already know the name. In his day, nobody in the capital could touch him with a brush. Not one artist came close. When all of this happened, he would have been pushing 50. To look at him, you'd never have guessed it mattered. He was small, hunched, all bone under loose gray skin, with the kind of sour, distrustful face that made strangers cross the street. Whenever he visited the mansion, he wore a clove-dyed hunting cloak and a soft black cap. Respectable enough clothing for a man of his standing. But there was something about him that never read as respectable. Maybe it was his mouth. His lips were a startling, wet red, obscene against the rest of his gray, dried-up face, more animal than human. Some said it was pigment, that he was in the habit of wetting his brushes between those lips. Others, less kind, simply said he moved like a monkey. That's where the nickname came from, the one the crueler servants used behind his back. Saruhide. Yoshihide the monkey. And speaking of monkeys, here's how the nickname earned its own strange little story. At the time, Yoshihide's only daughter, 15 years old, was working in the mansion as a junior lady-in-waiting. She didn't take after her father in the slightest. She'd lost her mother young, which maybe explains why she'd grown thoughtful and gentle beyond her years, quick to notice what other people needed before they asked. The lady of the house adored her. So did the other women of the household. Around that time, someone from Tenba province sent the lord a gift, a small, tame monkey. And the young lord of the house, a boy with a taste for mischief, decided, as a joke, to name the monkey after the painter, Yoshihide. It didn't take much. If the monkey so much as climbed a garden pine or dirtied a floor mat, the servants would howl its name down the halls. Yoshihide! Yoshihide! And chase it, half for sport, half out of real irritation. The monkey had a hard time of it. Then, one afternoon, the painter's daughter was walking down a long corridor, carrying a branch of red plum blossoms, with a letter folded into it. When she saw movement at the far end, it was the little monkey, Yoshihide the monkey, dragging one leg like it had been hurt, running for its life. Close behind it, switch raised, came the young lord himself, shouting, "Thief! Come back here, you little orange thief!" The girl hesitated, just for a second. Then the monkey, desperate, threw itself at the hem of her robe and let out a cry so pitiful that whatever hesitation she'd had disappeared. Still holding the plum branch in one hand, she opened her sleeve with the other and gathered the animal against her chest. "Forgive him, my lord," she said, bowing low. "He's only an animal. He doesn't know any better." The young lord skidded to a stop, furious, stamping his foot. "Don't defend him! That thief stole from my own tree!" "He's only an animal," she said again, then quieter, almost embarrassed. "And his name is Yoshihide. When you punish him, it feels like you're punishing my father. I can't just stand here and watch that." That did it. Whatever fight was left in the boy folded up on the spot. "Fine," he muttered, dropping the switch. "If you're begging for your father's life, I suppose I'll let the thief go." And he turned and walked back the way he'd come. It was that one small act of compassion, nothing more than a girl scooping up a frightened animal, that would end up sealing the girl's fate. None of us knew it yet. Not even her. Chapter 3. A Devoted Daughter. That was the beginning of the friendship between Yoshihide's daughter and the little monkey, Yoshihide. She hung a small gold bell, a gift from the young mistress of the house, around the monkey's neck on a bright red cord, and after that the animal barely left her side. Once, when she came down with a cold and had to stay in bed, the monkey sat at her pillow the whole time, looking miserable, chewing its own claws out of what I can only describe as worry. And strangely enough, once people saw that, nobody wanted to torment the monkey anymore. If anything, the mansion started to dote on it. Even the young lord who'd chased it with a switch took to tossing it persimmons and chestnuts. And when he heard that a guardsman had kicked the animal, they say he was furious. Word of all this reached the lord himself eventually. A daughter's devotion reflected back in an animal's devotion to her. It's said that's what finally moved him to summon the girl into his presence, monkey and all. "You're a good and faithful child," he told her. "I'll see you rewarded." For that, the girl was given a red silk robe. The monkey, watching, solemnly imitated the bow and pressed its own forehead to the floor, as if it too were receiving the honor, which delighted the Lord even further. I want to be clear about something here, because an ugly rumor started circulating around this time, and it deserves to be put to rest. The Lord favored Yoshihide's daughter, yes, but he favored her because he admired what he saw, a devoted daughter, and loyalty answering loyalty. That's all. It had nothing to do with desire. Whatever the gossips whispered later, understand this clearly once and for all. The Lord of Horikawa was not a man who would ever have looked twice at the daughter of a mere painter that way. I'll tell you later where that ugly rumor really came from. For now, just know it isn't true. After that day, the girls standing in the household only improved, and nobody envied her for it either. She was too well liked for that. But enough about the daughter for now. Let's go back to her father. Because even with the monkey adored across the whole household, Yoshihide himself was still despised, inside the mansion and out. It wasn't only the servants either. Even the venerable abbot of Yokawa, a man of real standing, would go pale with something close to rage at the mere mention of his name, as if he'd crossed paths with some kind of evil spirit. It was whispered, though I could never confirm it, that Yoshihide had once dared to sketch a mocking caricature of the abbot's own conduct, and that this was the real root of the old man's fury. True or not, the story tells you something. Nearly everywhere you turned, you'd hear the same kind of talk about Yoshihide. The only people who ever spoke well of him were other painters, or people who knew nothing of the man himself, only his work. Because behind that unpleasant face, Yoshihide hid something far uglier still. Chapter 4. A Man Without Virtue. Stingy, hard-hearted, shameless, lazy about anything that didn't involve a paintbrush, greedy without limit, and above all of it, insufferably arrogant, convinced day and night that he was the greatest painter the country had ever produced. That attitude didn't stop at painting either. Custom, courtesy, the ordinary rules everyone else lived by. Yoshihide treated all of it with the same open contempt, as if the rules that governed other people's lives simply didn't apply to him. One of his former students told me about the time a famous medium fell into a trance at some nobleman's estate, channeling a vengeful spirit, delivering a chilling prophecy in a voice that wasn't her own, while the whole room sat frozen with fear. Yoshihide sat there too, half listening, with a brush and some spare paper in his lap, quietly sketching the terrified expression on the medium's face. To him, an angry ghost was worth less than a good study of a real human face twisted in fear. That's the kind of man who could paint the goddess of fortune with the face of a common street performer, or paint the fierce guardian king Fudo with the body of a known criminal, and see nothing wrong with it. When his students worked up the nerve to point out that this was, at minimum, tempting fate, he'd just smirk. If the gods and Buddhas that Yoshihide paints want to punish Yoshihide for it, he'd say, that really would be something. More than one apprentice quit over comments like that. Not out of anger, but out of real fear that a man who talked about heaven that way might drag them down with him. His own students, in secret, called him Chira Iju, after some ancient demon said to have flown over from the mainland centuries ago, so proud that not even the gods could humble him. The name fit. There wasn't a man in the capital who thought less of himself compared to everyone else, because Yoshihide didn't compare himself to anyone at all. You can imagine how insufferable he was about his art specifically. His technique, brushwork, color, all of it, was unlike any other painter working, which is exactly why the artists who disliked him dismissed him as a fraud, a con man chasing cheap effects. They liked to point at the old masters, Kawanari, Kanaoka, and the lovely legends attached to their paintings. A painted plum blossom that supposedly gave off real fragrance on moonlit nights. A painted court lady whose flute you could just about hear if you listened closely enough passing the screen at night. Beautiful stories, elegant stories. Nothing about Yoshihide's reputation was elegant. It was always something closer to dread. His mural of the 5 stages of impermanence on the gate at Ryukige Temple, people swore that if you walked beneath it after dark, you could hear heavenly beings sighing, weeping. Some claimed they could smell decay coming off the paint. And the portraits he did of the ladies of the household on the Lord's own commission. Every woman who sat for one, they whispered, sickened within 3 years, like something had drained the soul clean out of her and died. If you asked his critics, that was the proof. His art had gone rotten at the root. Being the man he was, none of it embarrassed him. If anything, he wore it like a badge. I remember once the Lord teased him about it, almost fondly. You do seem to have a taste for ugly things. And Yoshihide, without missing a beat, grinning that unsettling red-lipped grin, said, "That's exactly right, my lord. Ordinary painters wouldn't understand it. But there's a kind of beauty in ugly things that only a real artist can see." Imagine talking to the most powerful man in the capital like that. And yet, even a man like that, arrogant, greedy, petty, contemptuous, had exactly one soft place left in him. One place where something like an actual human heart still beat. Chapter 5. A Father's Love. That soft place was his daughter. I've told you how devoted she was to him. What I haven't told you is that his devotion to her went further than anything I've ever seen from a father, before or since. Here was a man who wouldn't donate a single coin to a temple, no matter how many monks came asking. And yet, when it came to his daughter's clothes, her hairpins, anything she wanted, money meant nothing to him at all. It didn't seem real watching it, but his love for him only ever ran one direction. He had no interest in ever marrying her off. If anything, if a suitor had so much as looked at her wrong, I believe he'd have hired thugs off the street to have the man beaten in some alley. So when the Lord took a personal interest in her and brought her into the mansion to serve, the old man was furious, sullen, and biting through every audience with the Lord for weeks afterward. That, I think, is honestly where the ugly rumor got started. People saw how bitterly the father resisted and filled in the rest of the story themselves. The rumor was false. But his desperation to get her back, that part was completely real. Once, after Yoshihide finished a painting of the boy Bodhisattva Monju for the Lord, using the face of one of the Lord's favorite pages as the model, and it came out genuinely beautiful. The Lord was so pleased he offered him anything he wanted as a reward. "Name it," the Lord said. "Whatever you want, I'll grant it." Yoshihide, without hesitation, bowed and said, "Please, send my daughter home to me." Think about that for a second. Any other household in the capital, sure. But to ask the great Lord of Horikawa to his face, in front of witnesses, to give back a girl he'd taken in himself? Nobody did that. It was, at minimum, deeply disrespectful, and the Lord's good mood curdled instantly. He sat there a moment, just staring at Yoshihide. "No," he finally said, biting the word off short, and stood and walked out without another word. That happened 4 or 5 times, if I remember right. And each time I noticed something. The way the Lord looked at Yoshihide afterward got a little colder, a little more distant. Meanwhile, the daughter, maybe she could feel the tension building around her, had taken to crying quietly in her room, biting into the sleeve of her robe so no one would hear. People started whispering that the Lord desired her and she was resisting him. Some even claimed, and I want to say clearly right now, that this is not true, that the whole idea for the hell screen only happened because she'd refused him. That's not what happened. From where I stood, watching all of it, and I stood closer than most, the Lord kept her in the mansion out of pity, plain and simple. He looked at that stubborn, difficult father of hers and decided the girl deserved better than being sent back to that house, that she'd be safer, more comfortable, staying where she was. He was fond of her. That part is true. Desire is invention. Ugly invention, and nothing more. It was right around this point, with the father standing in the household falling fast because of his daughter, that the Lord did something none of us saw coming. Out of nowhere, he summoned Yoshihide and gave him an order, paid him a folding screen, a screen depicting hell. Chapter 6. The Hell Screen. I need to stop here and describe the painting itself because you won't understand what happened next without seeing it the way we saw it. Even now, I only have to close my eyes and the whole scene comes back to me. Whole, burning. Every other hell screen painted before it followed roughly the same formula. You know the kind. Yoshihide's didn't follow anything. In one corner, tucked small and almost incidental, he placed the 10 kings of hell and their attendants. Everything else, the entire rest of the composition, was fire. Endless fire. Crimson folding into deeper crimson, rolling and coiling like it might actually melt the mountains of swords and forests of blades it was consuming. Against all that flame, the only other color came from small, precise touches of yellow and blue on the officials' robes. Otherwise, everywhere your eye landed, it was fire, black smoke twisting through it like something alive, sparks of gold blown sideways through the dark like a storm. And the damned. That was the part that stopped your breath. In every other hell screen ever painted, the sinners are generic, interchangeable. Yoshihide had painted real people. Every rank of society dragged down together. Court nobles in ceremonial dress, elegant ladies in 5-layered robes, monks fingering prayer beads, students in tall clogs, little girls in long underrobes, priests waving their ritual wands. I could have stood there an hour and not finished naming everyone he'd painted into that fire. All of them fleeing in every direction at once, scattered like leaves in a hurricane, while ox-headed and horse-headed demons drove them forward with iron claws. Look closer, and it only got worse. A woman with her hair caught in a demon's trident, curled tighter than a spider. A man, some corrupt provincial official from the look of him, run through the chest by a spear, hanging upside down like a bat. Some being whipped with iron rods, some crushed slowly under boulders, some in the beaks of monstrous birds, some in the jaws of serpents. However many kinds of suffering exist, he'd found a way to paint every one of them, matched exactly to however many kinds of sinners he could imagine. And then, right at the center of it all, the worst image in the entire painting. Falling from the sky, just grazing the top branches of a tree made of blades. A tree already so heavy with the impaled bodies of the damned that its branches sagged under them. A single ox-drawn carriage, caught in the updraft of the flames. Through the carriage's blown open curtain, you could see a woman inside, dressed like nobility, like royalty almost. Her long black hair whipped backward into the fire, her pale throat arched, her whole body twisting in agony. Everything about her, her face, her posture, the carriage burning around her, was the picture of a soul being consumed by hell's own furnace. It was as if the entire unbearable horror of that giant screen had been poured into that single figure. Looking at her, you didn't just see hell. You could hear it. Somewhere behind your own ears, a scream that never actually sounded. And yet, somehow, you'd heard it anyway. This one figure was the reason for everything that followed. This was what he had to paint. And once he'd decided he needed to paint it, something happened that even a man like Yoshihide could never walk back from. Because in the end, he paid for that single figure with his own life. If I tell you the rest of this properly, I suppose I owe you the strangest part first. Because no matter how I say it, it will sound impossible to believe. How anyone, even a genius like him, could paint suffering that real, that alive, unless he had actually watched it happen. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell it in order, starting from the day the Lord gave him the commission. Chapter 7. The Nightmare. For the next 5 or 6 months, Yoshihide didn't come near the mansion at all. He was consumed by the screen, working on nothing else. And here's the strange thing about a father who supposedly couldn't live without his daughter. Once he had a brush in his hand, he apparently didn't want to see anyone, daughter included. According to his students, once he started a piece, something else seemed to move into him. They used to say, and some of them meant it literally, that his talent came from a bargain with some fox spirit. Because if you crept up and watched him work through a gap in the door, you could sometimes see pale shapes gathering close around him in the lamplight, like attendants. Whatever the reason, once the brush was in his hand, everything else in the world stopped existing for him. Day dissolved into night. He shut himself in that one room for so long, his own students barely remembered what he looked like in daylight. And when he was working on the hell screen, all of that got worse. One afternoon, a student was grinding pigment when the old man came in and said, out of nowhere, "I think I'll take a nap. Lately, my dreams have been bad." Nothing strange about that on its own, so the student just said, "Of course," and kept working. But then Yoshihide added, almost sheepish, "I need you to sit by my pillow while I sleep." The student thought it was odd. His teacher worried about dreams, but agreed easily enough and followed him into the workroom. It was shut tight, dark in the middle of the day, one lamp burning low, and the half-finished screen, still only sketched in charcoal outline, stood folded around the room like a wall. Yoshihide lay down, pillowed on his own arm, and within minutes had dropped into a heavy, exhausted sleep. Less than half an hour later, the student, still sitting by the pillow, started hearing something. A voice. Not words at first, just sound. Then the sound sharpened into words, the way a drowning man's voice sharpens as he comes up gasping for air. "So you want me to come? Where do you want me to go? To hell? To the burning hell? Who's asking me that? Who are you?" The student froze mid-stroke and leaned in, and by the lamp's dim light he could see his teacher's face had gone bone white, sweating in fat, heavy drops, mouth stretched open, gasping around a tongue that seemed to be twitching and darting on its own, like something with a will separate from the rest of him. It was that tongue the words were coming from. "You. It's you, isn't it? I thought it might be you. Come to take me, have you? Come on then, to hell. My daughter's waiting there. In hell. She's waiting for me there." The student swore that right at that moment something, some shapeless, twisted shadow, seemed to slide down across the surface of the folded screen behind them. He grabbed his teacher by the shoulders and shook him as hard as he could. Nothing. Yoshihide kept muttering to whatever he was seeing, eyes shut, lost somewhere far away. In the end, the student threw a basin of paint-rinsing water directly into his face. "Come, get in the carriage. Get in and come to hell with me." And then the words choked off into a strangled, gagging sound, and Yoshihide's eyes snapped open, and he sat bolt upright so fast it looked like something had yanked him up by a wire. Whatever he'd seen was still right behind his eyes. You could tell. He sat there, gasping, mouth open, staring at nothing, for a long, long moment. Then something in his face cleared, and just like that, the old irritability was back. "That's enough. Get out," he said, flat, cold, like nothing had happened at all. The student didn't argue. When you crossed Yoshihide in a mood like that, you learned to just leave. He said afterward that stepping into the ordinary daylight felt like waking from a nightmare himself. That's how bad it had gotten in that room. That one, at least, ended without anyone getting hurt. What his students would witness barely a month later left a mark none of them ever fully shook off. Chapter 8. Chains, Serpent, and Owl. Here's where it gets bad. A month later, Yoshihide called for another student, a sturdy young man, built more for a sword than a paintbrush. "I need to see a man bound in chains," he said. "No warmth in it. You'll have to bear with it a while." No time to react. The chain was already in his hands. One motion, and the boy hit the floor, arms wrenched behind him. Another pull, and he was wound tight as a coil. Only his head could still move. Blood, trapped under the chains, started to darken his skin. Yoshihide circled him, sketching. He didn't seem to see a person anymore, just a shape. Then something moved behind the jar in the corner. Black, glistening, slow at first. Then not. A snake. It's a snake. The cold tongue nearly touched the raw skin where the chain bit into his throat. Even Yoshihide wasn't ready for that. He dropped the brush, moved fast for a man his age, snatched the snake by the tail and held it out at arm's length while it curled back on itself, straining, unable to reach him. "You miserable thing. You've ruined my best sketch." Not a word of apology for the boy. Only irritation, as if the boy's suffering weighed less than one ruined line of ink. Back into the jar the snake went, Later, we learned it had been there the whole time. Another model, waiting its turn. If that's not enough to make the picture clear, here's the last one. The one that came closest to costing a boy his life. The youngest of his students, 13, maybe 14, a face soft enough that strangers mistook him for a girl. Called into the workroom one night, he found Yoshihide under the lamp, feeding raw meat from his palm to a bird he'd never seen before. Cat-sized, 2 feather tufts standing up like ears, round amber eyes. A horned owl, a gift from a hunter out of Karama. "See how tame she's gotten," Yoshihide said, and stroked her back. The owl's head snapped around. One shriek. She was airborne, talons out, straight for the boy's face. He got his sleeve up just in time. The impact hit his arm instead. He stumbled, swung his other arm to knock her off, and she was already gone again, wheeling up into the dark, circling for another pass. And through all of it, Yoshihide sat exactly where he was. Picked his brush back up, unrolled a fresh sheet of paper, sketching a terrified boy the way you'd sketch a bowl of fruit. Calm, absorbed, hungrier with every dive, every scream. Not the claws, not the beak. That was the real terror. The stillness of the man watching it happen. He might have been badly hurt, except something else was already moving in the dark. The same jar, the same black shape. It came gliding out, and the owl saw it and made her mistake. She dropped for it, talons first, and the two of them went into one furious thrashing knot on the floor. Wings hammering, a shriek that wouldn't stop. The lamp went over, oil across the boards. The room went black except for one thin line of fire crawling through spilled paint oil. And in that dark, wet chaos, feathers, scales, blood. 2 students ran in with a light, found the lamp on its side, one broken wing beating weakly. Coiled around it, throat to tip, black on black. Yoshihide was half risen, staring at the wreckage. Not horror, not surprise. Disappointment. Some angle of the wing, ruined before he could get it down. That was the look on his face. Not the boy, not the blood, the ruined sketch. Nobody ever found out what became of the snake, or the owl. Nobody wanted to ask. By now you understand what kind of dedication went into that screen, what kind of madness. And still it wasn't enough. By the end of that winter, the screen was 8/10 finished and stuck there. Something in it refused to come together. The harder Yoshihide pushed, the more it resisted, until some days he just sat and stared at what he'd painted, like he was deciding whether to scrape it all away and start over. And this same man, this mountain of pride who could sketch a dying face without blinking, started very quietly to cry. Chapter 9. Cracks. I only heard about the crying once, directly. A student crossing the garden glanced back and saw his teacher alone on the veranda, staring at nothing, tears standing in his eyes. The student left before Yoshihide noticed him, said it embarrassed him more than anything cruel the old man had ever done. Think about that. A man who could sketch real terror off a real face and feel nothing. Brought to tears by a painting that wouldn't finish. And while that was happening to the father, something quieter was happening to the daughter. She'd always been a little melancholy, soft-spoken, careful. Now it got worse. Her eyes, once the brightest thing about her, went shadowed, heavy, like she wasn't sleeping. First, the guesses were easy. Worried about her father, pining after some boy. Then a different rumor started, that the Lord was pressing her again, that whatever restraint he'd shown before was wearing thin. After that, nobody talked about her at all. The whole household, quietly, looking somewhere else. It was around then, one clear night, thin moon, the smell of plum blossoms just barely on the air, that something grabbed the hem of my hakama from behind. I nearly went for my knife. It was the monkey. Teeth bared white in the dark, fur standing up on the back of his neck. A sound I'd never heard him make before. Not chatter, something closer to a scream, pinched down to almost nothing, over and over. New robe, his claws already in the hem of it. I almost kicked him loose and kept walking. Then I remembered the guardsman, the one the young lord punished for kicking this same monkey. And something in my stomach told me this wasn't ordinary mischief. So I let him pull me. 5 steps, 6, 10. The corridor bent. Past it, the garden pond, pale and still under thin moonlight, a black pine against the sky. And then I heard it, behind a sliding screen, close. Not voices, no words at all, now that I think back on it clearly. Just a sound, muffled. A struggle, choked down to almost nothing. I stopped where I was. Every hair on my arms stood up. No crickets, no wind. Just a fish breaking the surface of the pond behind me. And ahead of me, in the dark, whatever was happening behind that door. I told myself, if this is trouble, I'll handle it. I stepped forward, slow, silent, pressed myself flat against the wood, held my breath, listened. Chapter 10, The Sliding Door. The monkey didn't wait for me to decide anything. 2 quick circles around my feet, a strangled shriek, then a leap straight up onto my shoulder. I staggered back. My spine hit the door behind me. That settled it. No more waiting. One motion. The door slid open. I lunged into the dark, toward whatever the moonlight couldn't reach. Not a blade. Not a fist. A person moving the other way, fast, who nearly collided with me and went down instead, one knee on the floor, staring up like she'd seen something that couldn't exist. Yoshihide's daughter. I'd known this girl for years. Careful, contained. Never once like this. Eyes wide and shining, cheeks flushed dark, hair and robes in real disarray. Dressed differently than usual, too. For 1 second, I wasn't sure I recognized her at all. I braced against the doorframe, pointed not at her, past her, at footsteps already fading down the corridor. Asked with my eyes alone, who was that? She shook her head, said nothing, bit down on her own lip. I crouched closer, asked again, quieter. Who was that? Nothing. Just the shake of her head, and now her eyes spilled over, and her teeth pressed harder into that already bitten lip. I'm not a clever man. I never claimed to be. But some things you understand without being told. And some things you don't ask, because some part of you already knows you won't like the answer, and knows that asking might be its own kind of cruelty. So I didn't ask again. I slid the door shut, told her gently as I knew how to go rest. Walked away myself. Something heavy in my chest. The sense that I'd seen a thing I wasn't meant to see, and that it would matter later, even if I couldn't say how yet. 10 steps. Something caught my hakama again. The monkey, sitting upright at my feet, two small hands pressed together, bowing. Again. Again. The gold bell at his throat chiming soft with every bow. Thanking me, in the only language he had, for walking away. Chapter 11. Yoshihide's Plea. Half a month later, Yoshihide came to the mansion and asked for the Lord directly. Unusual for a man of his standing. Not that day. He was shown in fast. The Lord had always had a soft spot for him. Same clothes as always, incense-dyed cloak, worn cap. But his face was tighter than usual. His voice, when it came, cracked and hoarse. About the hell screen. I've given it everything, day and night. It's nearly finished. That's good to hear. But something was off in how the Lord said it. Flat. Rehearsed. No, Yoshihide said, eyes on the floor. It isn't good. There's one part I still can't paint. Can't paint it? How? I only paint what I've seen. Anything else, I don't believe. And if I don't believe it, I can't finish it. That's the same as not painting it at all. A bitter twist of the mouth, almost a laugh. I've survived a fire, used it for the flames around Fudo. I've seen men chained. I've watched what a bird does to something smaller than itself. I know suffering, my lord. There isn't much I haven't stood close enough to draw. Then what's missing? Yoshihide's eyes came up, met the Lord's. Something in them made the whole room feel colder. What I have never seen, he said, and cannot paint until I do, is a noble woman's carriage, falling from the sky, burning. The Lord's face didn't move. Then, slow, something curled at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. So, to finish the screen, you'll need to see hell itself. I have seen hell. Something in the way he said it made even the Lord go quiet. In dreams, a week. However many nights a week, you have no idea what visits me while I try to sleep. Horned things, 3 faces, 6 arms, hands that clap without sound, mouths that scream without voice. Nearly every night, for months. That isn't what I can't paint. I know suffering. I know it well. His jaw worked. Once. Twice. What I cannot paint, he said again, is that one woman, that one carriage. Chapter 12. The Burning Carriage. I want to paint it falling, Yoshihide said. And for the first time he lifted his eyes and looked straight at the Lord. There was something in that look that turned the whole room cold. Right in the middle of the screen, a lacquered carriage dropping out of a burning sky. Inside it, a woman of high rank, beautiful, her black hair loose in the fire, twisting in agony. Her face turned up through the smoke, brows drawn tight, her hands tearing at the blinds, trying to shield herself from the rain of sparks. And all around the carriage, a flock of monstrous birds, 10 of them, 20 of them, shrieking, wheeling, closing in. That woman. That one woman in that one burning carriage. No matter what I do, I cannot paint her. Silence. Then, slower, quieter, like a man saying something he'd rehearsed alone in the dark 1,000 times and never once expected to say out loud. I need to see a real carriage burn. In front of me. And if it's possible, before the Lord could answer. Before anyone in that room could stop him. I need a woman inside it, dressed as nobility, chained so she can't get free. burning while I watch, while her flesh blackens, while her hair goes up like a torch. That is the only way I will ever paint the one thing I still can't paint. Silence. Total. Sit with that a second. The way we had to sit with it. This wasn't a request. This was a man asking the most powerful lord in the capital to burn a living woman alive in chains for a painting. And he wasn't flinching. If anything, something almost peaceful in his face. The calm of a man who's already decided this is the only way forward and has stopped weighing whether it's right. The Lord's face went dark. Whatever amusement had been there, gone. Something harder to read in its place. Anger, maybe. Or recognition. Like he was finally seeing all the way down into a man he'd only glimpsed the surface of. Nobody in that room breathed. Then the Lord laughed. Sudden, sharp. It didn't stop. It kept rising until he had to catch his breath between gasps of it. Nothing warm in that laugh. Nothing kind. Something crawled up the back of my neck just standing near it. Very well. He wiped at his eyes. I'll give you exactly what you've asked for. Don't waste your breath wondering if it's possible. That isn't your place. His voice dropped. Quieter. Stranger. Almost tender. Almost gleeful. The way a man talks about a gift he's excited to give. I'll have the carriage prepared. A woman inside, dressed exactly as you describe. Chained exactly as you describe. And when the fire takes her, skin curling back, hair going up in flame, bone showing through, you'll be standing close enough to paint every second of it. Consider yourself fortunate, painter. Something cold went through my chest. I couldn't have told you why. Not yet. His mouth kept twisting at the corners. His eyes kept catching some private light none of the rest of us could see. This wasn't only about the painting. This was a man whose own long-buried wish had just been handed back to him, wrapped in someone else's request so he'd never have to admit it was his. Yoshihide went pale. Still. For a moment I thought he'd faint where he knelt. Then, slow, every muscle giving out at once, he lowered himself flat against the floor. My lord, I am more grateful than I can say. 20 years I served the Lord of Horikawa. This was the only moment I ever felt real pity for Yoshihide. The only time I looked at that arrogant, insufferable little man and thought, whatever is about to happen to him, no one deserves it. Not even him. Because I think kneeling there, he already understood exactly what his wish was going to cost him. I think he saw it coming. Whole, all at once. And bowed anyway. Chapter 13. The Night at Yukige Palace. 2 or 3 nights later, the Lord kept his word. He summoned Yoshihide, let him watch, up close, exactly what he'd asked for. A carriage burning, in the dark, at a place called the Yukige Villa. Nobody had lived there in years. It belonged to the Lord's dead sister. After she died there, the gardens went wild, and the rumors gathered fast. A red hakama drifting the empty corridors on moonless nights. Him never touching the floor. Wrong, even in daylight. At night, worse. Water running too loud in the silence. Herons startling up white against the stars, looking for one bad second like something that shouldn't exist. No moon that night. Black. Starless feeling, though the stars were there. By torchlight, the Lord took his seat near the veranda. Pale blue robe, deep violet trousers. cross-legged on white brocade. 5 or 6 attendants around him, like a court held in the middle of a graveyard. One of them stood out, though I couldn't say why yet. A soldier, thick-built, survived a famine campaign by eating human flesh. Strong enough now to tear a stag's antler off with his bare hands. Full armor, sword at his hip. Silent, waiting. Something about his stillness unsettled me more than almost anything that night. In the middle of the garden, the carriage, black lacquered, wheels dug into the dirt, roof swallowing a piece of dark sky, gold fittings catching the torchlight in small, scattered points, like something watching from inside the metal itself. Blue curtains, sealed shut on every side. You couldn't see a thing of what was inside. That alone on a warm spring night put a chill through me. Torchbearers stood in a loose ring, keeping the smoke off the Lord, watching, saying nothing. Off to one side, apart from everyone, knelt Yoshihide. Same worn cloak, same soft cap, smaller than I'd ever seen him under all that open sky. Behind him, half swallowed by the dark, a second shape. A student, I assumed. I couldn't make out his face. Close to midnight, the dark pressed in like something with weight to it, holding its breath with the rest of us. And into that stillness the Lord finally spoke. Chapter 14. The Carriage Burns. Yoshihide. A sound answered from across the garden. Not words. A strangled, barely human acknowledgement. Tonight, I give you exactly what you asked for. Watch closely. I glanced sideways at his men. Some understanding passing between them I still can't explain. That carriage, you recognize it. Mine. A longer pause. Crueler. Inside, right now, chained, unable to move. A woman who's committed a crime. When I burn it, she burns. Flesh, bone, screaming while she does it. This is your model, painter. Don't waste a second. Watch her skin curl back. Watch her hair lift off her scalp like it's trying to fly. A third pause. His voice shifted, gleeful now, hungry. A spectacle like this doesn't come twice. I intend to watch it myself. He raised one hand. Lift the blind. A torch. A curtain drawn back in one motion. Torchlight hit the inside of the carriage. Chained. An embroidered robe. Black hair loose and gleaming. A jeweled hairpin catching the first light of the fire. I nearly screamed where I stood. Yoshihide's daughter. No mistaking her. Not the shape of her, not the tilt of her head. That quiet, careful profile I'd known for years. Every part of me went rigid at once. Beside me, the soldier. The one who'd eaten human flesh. Who could tear a stag's antler off bare-handed. Lurched up, hand on his sword hilt. A look at Yoshihide sharp enough to feel from where I stood. Because Yoshihide had moved. Whatever held him in place, shock, disbelief, one last shred of hope it was someone else, broke all at once. He was on his feet, arms out, lunging blind toward the carriage. Too late. Burn it. Torches, thrown. The carriage, up. Chapter 15. The fire. Fire found the roof first. The purple fringe along the eaves whipped once, violent, before the whole thing vanished under white smoke. Smoke tearing itself apart from the inside, throwing sparks, shedding gold and burning silk into the dark like the sky had cracked open. Flame climbed the window lattice, tongues taller than a man. a second sun, fallen out of the heavens, dying in that garden. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, mouth open, watching. Yoshihide, I will never forget his face. He'd been running when the fire caught, and the instant it did, something in him stopped. Frozen mid-stride, arms half raised, planted, staring into the flame like it had nailed him to the ground. Gold light on every part of his face, every part of it twisted into something I don't have words for. Eyes stretched too wide, mouth open, the muscles of his cheeks twitching over and over. Some horror moving through him too fast for his face to hold still. I have seen condemned men walked to execution. I have seen the damned, painted by his own hand, dragged screaming toward demons' mouths. Nothing came close to that old man's face in that moment. The soldier broke first, went pale, looked away from Yoshihide, up at the Lord instead, silently asking, was this truly meant to happen? The Lord didn't look away. Jaw tight, lips pressed thin, and every so often a laugh. Low, wrong, not quite human anymore. He stared into that fire, unblinking, something burning in his own eyes I couldn't name and didn't want to. And in the carriage, I won't linger here. You know what fire does to a person. I won't make you sit through the detail I had to. Only this, her face turned up through the smoke, pale as bone. Her hair lifted loose and burning, filling the air around her head. Almost beautiful, if you could forget what you were looking at. Her robe going dark, curling in on itself, faster than cloth should burn. It looked like something out of the hell screen itself, already painted, already finished, alive in that garden in front of us. Then the wind shifted, one hard gust. Everyone standing there felt it at the same moment. Something about to happen. Something did. Out of the dark, small, black, flying, not falling, flung over the blade-tipped branches of that burning tree of swords, where the damned in Yoshihide's own painting hung skewered, straight down into the heart of the fire. Onto her, one high, tearing cry. Animal, desperate. Then two more, muffled by smoke. We didn't need to see its face. The mucky, the one she'd saved years ago. The one with a gold bell and her father's name. It had followed her from wherever it had been. All the way to that garden. All the way to that fire. And jumped in, rather than watch her burn alone. Nothing left to see after that. One last burst of gold sparks. The monkey gone. The girl gone. Just a column of fire roaring up into a starless sky. Louder than any burning carriage had a right to sound. If you'd asked me right then whether I was looking at a carriage or a pillar of fire that had simply always stood there, I couldn't have told you which. And in front of it, Yoshihide stood absolutely still. This part I still don't understand, even now. That look, the horror, the twitching, the helpless agony, gone. In its place, radiance, something almost holy. Arms wrapped around his own chest, gazing into that fire like he was finally, after 50 years, seeing the single most beautiful thing that had ever existed. He didn't seem to remember the Lord was there, didn't seem to remember any of us. As if the burning, the color of it, the violence of it, the woman dying inside it, had stopped being a horror at all, had become instead the most magnificent sight his eyes had ever been given. I don't believe he was seeing his daughter's death. I believe he'd stopped seeing her entirely. Only the fire existed for him now. Its unbearable color, her shape within it. A vision so complete it swallowed his grief whole and left only wonder behind. Something inhuman stood over him. I don't have a better way to say it. The fury of some old beast out of a story, wearing the shape of an exhausted old man. Even the crows overhead, screaming and wheeling since the fire started, gave him a wide berth. Like some crown only they could see hung above his head. We stood there, every servant among us, holding our breath, filled with something I can only call awe, despite ourselves. The awe you'd feel looking on a newly enlightened Buddha. The fire roaring, Yoshihide transfixed. Only one man in that garden wasn't caught in the spell. The Lord, pale as paper, foam at the corners of his mouth, both hands gripping his own knees, breathing in short, ragged pulls. A man dying of thirst who can't stop gasping for water that isn't there. That night ended the story of Yoshihide's daughter. The story of the screen wasn't over yet. Chapter 16. The Painter's Fate. Word spread through the capital fast. The most common version. The Lord had burned her out of jealous revenge, punishing her for refusing him. Not true. I'll say it one last time. Whatever cruelty the Lord was capable of, and there was plenty, his real target that night was something else. The bottomless pride of an artist willing to burn anything, even his own daughter, to finish a painting. I heard him say so himself more than once. After. People talked about Yoshihide too, about a father who could watch his own child burn and still want to keep painting. A monster, some called him, less than human. The abbot of Horikawa, the one who'd hated Yoshihide for years, ever since that old rumor about the mocking caricature, used to say it plainest. However gifted a man is in his one art, if he abandons what makes a person human, hell is the only place left for him. A month later, Yoshihide brought the finished screen to the mansion. The abbot was there. He looked at it, really looked. The fire, the falling carriage, the woman at its center. Whatever he'd been about to say died in his throat. A long moment, then quiet, almost reluctant. Well done. I remember the Lord's mouth twisting into something that wasn't quite a smile. After that, nobody in the household spoke badly of Yoshihide again. Something about the painting made it impossible. Some old, serious feeling took hold of anyone who stood in front of it. People said you could feel the actual weight of hell settle onto your shoulders looking at it. Like it wasn't paint anymore. Like it was a window. By then, Yoshihide was already gone. The night after he delivered the screen, he went into that same workroom, tied a rope to the beam, hanged himself. I think, in the end, a man who'd given his daughter to the fire for one perfect image couldn't go on living in the world after it was finished. Nothing left in it for him to want. His body is buried where his house used to stand. The little stone that once marked it has worn smooth by now, I'd guess. Soft with moss. Unreadable. No different from any other stone in the ground. Nobody left to remember which grave it was.